welcome to the Dex, where we cover trivia and strategy for a different Pokemon each week. I'm PokeKellz, and this mopey Melvin over here is Sightseer Alex. Why the long face, dude?
Whatever, man, I'm fine. It's just that today's Pokemon reminds me of cleaning up after kids at birthdays at my old job.
Your old job?
Yeah, you know, before I wisely decided to place all my hopes and dreams on a web series about a game I don't have the rights to.
Alright, whatever. What could possibly remind you of kids' birthday parties, and why would that be a sad thing in the first place?
Well, you know, because of the balloons, man.
Sorry, the balloons?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, just say the things so we can jump into the episode. I know we're trying to go out of order.
Fine, it's Drifblim. Drifblim is the blimp Pokemon from Gen 4. It's the evolution of Drifloon from the same gen, and it's notable as the signature Pokemon of Fantina, the leader of Hearthome City Gym. Also, she wears a Drifblim dress in contests, and some dialogue implies that she's from Kalos, but none of that explains why you hate balloons so much, Alex.
Ugh, okay, geez. Haven't you ever hosted a party at your house where you felt like being festive and put helium balloons everywhere? Well, you know that moment like 2 hours after the party's ended and all the balloons are still there, but now they're just kind of half floating and they move around like they're being pulled by invisible little kids? Oh! Can't even imagine it without feeling weird. Ugh! Ugh!
Well, yeah, duh. That's obviously exactly the type of thing Drifblim is a reference to, except that in real life it's just tiny little air currents taking advantage of a balloon's relatively large surface area in relation to its mass, and moving it around a little.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a scientific explanation, but that doesn't make Drifblim any less creepy or mysterious. Like, did you know that they're totally inactive by day, but then they float into the sky in giant masses of hundreds of little Pokemon at night? Or if you happen to notice that they all just vanish into thin air?
Yeah, it's tight, and if Drifloon's Pokedex entries are any indication, Drifblim might be disappearing to the same underworld where Drifloon bring the children that they steal. Drifblim don't steal kids so much as they just give rides, but it's still kind of weird because all they do is drift and you never know where you're gonna land.
Well, duh, what did you expect from a Pokemon whose name is a portmanteau of drifting blimp? You can't steer a drifting blimp.
Well, yeah, but that's still pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, how do they even do that anyway?
What, float?
Yeah.
Easy goof, basic science, but even more importantly, let's take a look at how Drifblim's design is based on humanity attempting to do the exact same thing. It's time for a brief history of Pokemon.
Oh, I love that thumbnail. Now first, before we begin, something needs to be put to bed. Just because it's named Drifblim doesn't necessarily mean it has to be one, and Drifblim definitely isn't a blimp. Some people also think its name comes from dirigible, since that's the blanket term for all those kinds of floating airships, but it simply isn't the case.
This all comes down to the definition of a dirigible, which dictates that they are any lighter-than-air craft that is powered and steerable as opposed to free-floating. And since we all know floating around is Drifblim's whole gimmick, instead let's compare it to a hot air balloon because guys, he looks exactly like one.
Hot air balloons are largely recreational airships, and they use heated air to float. The balloon part is known as the envelope and has a heated flame at its base, and long story short, hot air is less dense than cold air, so the whole thing rises and it takes whatever kind of passenger-bearing basket you want with it.
For more detailed info on this concept, jump to about 3 minutes into our Talonflame episode. But basically going up and down in the thing just amounts to adding and subtracting hot air. And according to the Pokedex, Drifblim can do that too by generating and releasing gas inside of its body. And before you say gas makes it a blimp, don't forget that air is a gas too. Deal with it.
And now that this stage is set, let's take you to France on November 21st, 1783, when a hot air balloon was used in the first ever demonstration of human-carrying free flight technology. It was originally viewed as so dangerous that King Louis XVI wanted to use death row criminals as the test subjects, but two balloon pioneers, Jean-François Pilartre de Rosier and François Laurent de la Arlandes, subbed in at the last second.
Since then, there's been tons of other inventions for sending people skyward, but the hot air balloon is still fairly popular for fancy eccentric races around the globe using giant and fairly predictable air currents high up in our atmosphere, like some alternate universe version of Crush the Turtle on the EAC. Grab shell, dudes!
Also, just like, there's a ton of other great details. The red spikes at the base of Drifblim's envelope represent the fire that keeps air in the balloon warm, and the 4 tendrils hanging off its body seem to be related to the ropes connecting the basket to the balloon.
Drifblim has no basket, but instead uses its tendrils to wrap up and carry people off. A little more creepy, but hey, that's ghost types for you. But the cutest thing of all is that X marking on Drifblim's face. Tears are understandably one of the more common hot air balloon complications and are, even after all these years, best fixed with a glued-on patch. Guess some things never change.
like war. War never changes.
Do you ever think about the things that you say?
Do you ever feel like buying me Nuka World for Xbox One?
What? How does that...
Boy, I really want it.
Don't you have some strategy or something that you should be doing right now?
What? Oh, yeah, Battle Strats, go!
I really want it too. Let's get it.
Drifblim is one of those Pokemon who would benefit greatly from having one extra move slot, because as it stands, his stats leave him too many super specific jobs, and none of them are much more than a roll of the dice. But if you're still determined to bring Drifblim with you to VGC, here's a set that could work if you got lucky. Start with a bold one and super train in HP and defense.
If performed correctly and luck is on your side, this can leave you with some pretty scary sweepers on your bench. It requires a lot of setup, which is not great for a relatively fast-paced meta like VGC, but that's why you run Minimize with a Citrus Berry, because then maybe it'll buy you some time that you need.
Probably your best bet is going to be to pair him up with someone good at causing distractions like Liepard or Thundurus, and then do moves in this order: Minimize, Minimize, Stockpile, Stockpile, Baton Pass. Do it right, and you can potentially give a buff, legendary, or mega on your bench the boost it needs to edge out the competition or set up for a clean sweep.
Either you're going to do exactly this and create an unhittable trampling machine, or you'll use the Destiny Bond you're running in the last slot, and at least you'll take somebody out with you. And again, Drifblim is not the greatest, but he's also not the worst, so take advantage of his unique strengths. For example, he can switch in on Fake Out and Earth Power. Dope, right? That's pretty essential.
And that's it! Of course, that's not the only way to train a Drifblim, so as always, here are a few random thoughts.
You can also use the Focus Sash and apply the same philosophy. It gives you the security of an extra turn, unless you get hit by a stupid broken Kanga, but it'll probably proc less often than a Citrus Berry, so really, the choice is yours.
Destiny Bond can also be swapped out for a few other useful moves like Pain Split, which goes really well with the Focus Sash, or Skill Swap, which can be instrumental in ruining Groudon, Kyogre, or Rayquaza's day when so much depends on the weather. Really just think about your team when making your choice.
And finally, if it's running Baton Pass, you might just want to go crazy and try it with the weakness policy. It's unlikely you'll survive most super effective hits, but if you think you can, it just means extra stats you can pass off, so why not?
And that's it! Drifblim! Honestly, this did nothing to help my fear of balloons.
Oh, come on.
If anything, I'm even more scared of them now, but that's okay, because I can take my mind off it by checking out this entire playlist of Dex episodes about ghost types by clicking right here, or by clicking here to check out our weekly hour-long podcast about Pokemon current events and answering fan mail. And don't forget to subscribe. I'm Sightseer Alex.
And I'm PokeKellz. Tune in next week for another hard-hitting episode of
The Dex.